non-aligned nations, and Indira uses that non-alignment as a policy to steer between East and West, a difficult course that often wins her hostility and suspicion in both the United States and the Soviet Union.
Many people feel that either you're with them the whole way, or you have to be discarded. And I think basically it's that. Now we have quite different problems, and we have to view our problems from our situation, historical as well as geographical. We can't view them from the point of view of the global strategy of other countries which are far distant.
Differing national strategies have led to some classic misunderstandings. The United States in the 1960s refused to sell India the arms she most needed, aircraft and other sophisticated equipment. India was driven to buy arms from the Soviet Union, for which India was then regarded by some critics as anti-American. This attitude was reinforced 10 years later when India signed a friendship treaty with the Soviet Union. But when the Soviet Union pressed India to endorse its moves in Afghanistan, India refused. For this, India was regarded as unfriendly in Moscow. When the United States pressed India to condemn the Soviet Union, India refused the Americans, for which India was regarded as pro-Soviet in Washington. India has been developing greater independence from Soviet arms by building her own industries and by shifting important arms purchases to England and France. Do you see any improvement in relations between India and the United States?
We are trying our very hardest. And what we say to them is that we may differ on many points, but that is no reason not to keep friendship in the areas where we can agree. And this is how, of course, we've built up even with Pakistan and China, where countries which invaded us and which have been very hostile.
India and the United States, as the two largest democracies, also share a common interest in the preservation of freedom in the world.
In a country of India's size and great diversity, I don't think any other system can last for long. Because, as I said, the democracy allows lots of explosions, which you can deal with as they arise. But if you suppress all those explosions, then it can be too big to be handled.
The most strident problems Indira Ghandi faces continue to be internal. Sikhs agitating for separate nationhood, farmers marching for higher crop prices, city workers marching for lower food prices, Hindus and Muslims for protections from each other. Trade unions managed by opposition political parties are inciting massive demonstrations against new emergency-like laws that allow preventive detention and massive arrests without usual due process. Tensions between the two sides of India's economy, one part state-owned and run, the other part capitalist businesses, rouse other protests against regulations, shortages, and widespread corruption among administrators and businesses. The protests are amplified by the press, parliament, and political parties. But Mrs. Ghandi also tries to hear for herself the voices of India. She begins nearly every workday by meeting visitors from all parts of the country in a ceremony called darshan, literally the vision of her.
Balaji. 300 children have come from the heart.
We'll have it looked into because the chief minister is the one to do it.
Yes.
No? So we'll get in touch with him and tell him. कब कहाँ से?
25 दिन हो गए मैडम, कोई एक्शन नहीं हो रहा पुलिस की तरफ से।
A woman is appealing for help. Her child has been kidnapped and the police have not been able to find him.
वो क्रिमिनल था जो वहाँ जाके रहा है, केस भी
उसको
है
पता
उसके
लग
ऊपर,
गया सब।
लेकिन कुछ कर नहीं रहे वो लोग।
क्रिमिनल है और गैंग है वो।
नहीं उस आदमी को पहचानते हैं आप?
जी अब तो यहाँ से दिल्ली रिकॉर्ड से हुआ जी, पहले तो वहाँ तो नाम बदल के रहता था।
25 दिन हो गए अभी तक कोई किसी ने पता नहीं लगा।
अभी पता करते हैं।
Don't worry, Mrs. Ghandi says. We will look into it.
हमको आपने हुक्म बताना कि हम बुढ़ा आदमी हमारी पेंशन गिरी मर गए हम।
This man's pension has been cut off.
प्रधान साहब ने लिखा हम आज हम घर से मरते मरते आते हैं, न किराया न भाड़ा, आज हमको दिला देना चाहिए।
An untouchable invites Mrs. Ghandi to visit his village.
मैं लिखवा के लाई हूँ, सब लिख के लाई। अभी नहीं, मैं आपको दूंगी आज लिख के हमको।
व्यवसाय में हो
This is a delegation from a group of Muslims who have been victims of violence by other religious groups.
200-400 सारे कागजात जाए किए जा रहे हैं।
They plead that Muslims should be able to live under their own religious laws and be guaranteed their own rights within India.
यहाँ बुलाते हैं तो एक आदमी आता है, वहाँ पे जो सेक्रेटरी चाहिए जो सबसे मिल सकेंगे।
यही बिहार का ही मसला है, तो औकाफ का मसला है। जब हम जाते
They
हैं
want protection against communal violence and mistreatment by police they claim are prejudiced against them.
और मुसलमानों को वर्गलाया जाता है।
And then there are the politicians. These are the workers of the Congress I party, I for Indira. The politicians have not lost hope of persuading Rajiv Gandhi to give up his job as an airline pilot and enter politics. They take every opportunity to invoke the traditions of Rajiv's grandfather Nehru and his dead brother Sanjay. In May 1981, the announcement came. Rajiv had quit his job as an airline pilot. He then declared himself a candidate in an election for a seat in Parliament, the same seat that had been occupied by his brother Sanjay. Rajiv had made his decision with the help of two women. One of them was his wife Sonia.
He decided, but if Sonia had been said no, then he wouldn't have. That's what he means. You know, I'm one of those people who, well, I'm naturally very happy about the results. But I find that everything in life is always mixed up. There's nothing that is sheer happiness or sheer sorrow. There's always a mixture of both. As one of our ancient, I think he was a historian, he's the one who wrote a history of Kashmir long ago, 6th century or something. In that he has a phrase that life is like sunshine and shadow. And sunshine is hardly ever without any shadow. Although sorrow, I mean, shadow by itself is usually just shadow.
What is at stake for Rajiv in this election?
In what way?
For you? For you
But when you go into something, obviously you want to succeed in it.
Whatever you do, you should do it to the best of your ability and try and achieve a certain standards of functioning and try and get a good result.
My father did his first political work in that area, and then my husband stood from there as Member of Parliament.
The districts of Raebareli and Ameti have been traditional home ground for electing generations of candidates from this family. Rajiv will campaign there for 1 month before his mother joins him in the heat and dust of his final tour.
My hair's always in a mess when I go on tour, so it's better to have it covered. Then it protects it a little bit from the dust and everything.
And the heat also?
And the heat, especially here. You know, I don't like the heat at the back of my neck. And that's why the Arabs...
So when you have the sari like this, then also you don't have the heat there?
No, sometimes. You see how it's sometimes hanging like this, so this is open. So when I go here in the morning, I sometimes do like this. And that's why the Arabs cover this.
Mogadishu, it was 125.
That's Fahrenheit, you see.
Fahrenheit is how much? 125 Fahrenheit is how many degrees?
It's quite a lot, you know. Now
Here it's 43.
Well, 43 is very hot, isn't it?
It was here 43.
So it was very hot. And it's not just that, it's the mixture of the
heat and damp.
The dust and the dust. The sun and the dust.
It is the rural villagers who see him first. The airline pilot brought to earth. The quiet Ghandi beginning to speak out. He speaks in Hindi of duty and democracy. It is very important, he tells them, that everyone should vote, that you strengthen the hand of this administration. He recalls his brother Sanjay and promises Sanjay made to them. And he says, I will fulfill those promises. Rajiv's campaign is bringing him face to face with the most powerful force in India, a power so great that anyone who would guide India must find ways to direct it.
Members of the Central Council of Health and the Central Family Planning Council, distinguished guests. My own views on health and especially on family planning are well known and have often been repeated even in the last few months. Also, we are talking here to those who are already converted, to those who are in the field. And the question before us is how we can convert others in large enough numbers, not only for family planning, but even in ordinary elementary health measures.
It is population, the sheer numbers of people, that most threatens the health and progress of India. Ghandi programs for family planning have converted some Indians to the idea of smaller families. India would have some 39 million more mouths to feed today if not for the family planning programs. But in Nehru's time, the population had already swelled to 400 million people. Since then, it has nearly doubled to some 700 million souls. Continuation of the present birth rate could be ruinous to Indira Gandhi's effort to improve the life of the average Indian.
People don't want only grain now, they want many other things. I mean, a child has the right to education, health services, recreation, a good job when he grows up. And the more people you have, obviously, the more difficult it is to provide with. The rate of increase of our grain production is faster than the growth of the human population. But if the population goes on and on and on growing, then I don't know whether we can keep that up.
हमारी बहनें
Rajiv and his brother were brought up to lead it when they were small, till they went to boarding school. I think they were thoroughly spoilt in boarding school. But you see that something must have remained because, I mean, he hasn't faced the dust and all these years. You know, being a pilot, it's quite a come down from the sky to an Indian village. When Sanjay was elected, we decided to extend it to MET and have a joint, either have a joint or separate. But then he died, so I had one here on my own. They'd said to send Rajiv. They were the ones pressurizing us to send Rajiv, send us Rajiv.
They said, send us Rajiv. A replacement, they mean, for Sanjay. Sanjay, who continues to dominate these meetings and the speeches of Rajiv and his still grieving mother.
और आपसे एक दोस्ती बनाने आया हूँ. ऐसे ही संजय आए थे.
I have come to meet you and to understand your problems and to earn your friendship. Sanjay also came here, and he had made many promises to you. We will fulfill them. The other son, Sanjay, Sanjay. Though Sanjay was the younger son, it was he who grew up with the taste for power, and his mother was delighted with him. She helped him begin to build his own political following. But Sanjay struck many as impulsive and high-handed. This played into the hands of the political opposition and its mounting fight against Mrs. Gandhi's government. As conditions deteriorated, Mrs. Gandhi in 1975 took a step that shocked the nation. Without warning, she arrested and jailed her opposition. She declared an emergency and assumed dictatorial powers. She suspended freedom of the press, ejected some Western newsmen, and that shocked the Western world. She promulgated her own interpretation of the word democracy.
It's not democracy that is not well, that can be said to be not suited, but it's how people use it. Now, any system has certain rules. The rules of democracy are that while the ruling group should allow freedom of expression, association, etc., to the opposition, surely the opposition also has a responsibility that it will allow those who are elected to carry on the government for the period for which they're elected. Now, if they don't do it, then there's a danger to democracy. Equally, if the government doesn't allow, of course, that's also a danger, but if they don't do it, it's all. Now, this is what is happening here. This is what started in a big way in 75, and we really felt that if we didn't do, sort of shock the nation, we would drift downhill very fast.
Officials and police interpreted the power down the line. Abuses spread as did an atmosphere of fear among the intellectuals, fear of speaking out, fear of arrest. In fact, the Indian Constitution provided for emergency rule by a prime minister. But to many, Sanjay seemed to be exercising the power too. Enforced slum clearance with bulldozers, in population control efforts that aroused fears of forced sterilization. For herself, Mrs. Ghandi used the power to make her bureaucracy perform,